Hi, everybody, and welcome to Spokle's webinar, Learn How I Write Blog Posts That Get Read by Thousands. Thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Sarah Burke, and, and I'm going to be your host and presenter today. I'm also a content marketer at Spokle. I've been with Spokle for about 9 months now, and before that I was high school English and history teacher. So I absolutely adore doing these webinars. I absolutely adore kind of teaching and talking to you guys. And just to clarify, when I say I'm the content marketer at Spokle, Spokle is a really, really small team of only about 5 people. So I handle all the marketing related stuff. So when I say I'm the content marketer, I'm also the content writer, manager, editor, social guru, I do it all. Which gives me a really good perspective on how to write content from kind of all points of view, not just as the writer or as the social media marketer. I kind of have an idea of how to get this done from all the different angles. I just think it's really useful for you guys. So before I get started, I just want to go through a few housekeeping things. So this webinar will be recorded, and then a replay of the webinar will be sent to you a few hours after the webinar finishes. And finally, there will be a 5-minute Q&A at the end of the webinar. So if you have any questions, if you wouldn't mind leaving them to the end, that'd be great. I'm on my own today. I don't have a facilitator, so I don't have anybody to kind of read the questions and alert me to them. So I find it very difficult to go through to the chat and then back to the webinar. So if you're writing anything in the chat, I'm not ignoring you. I'll get to them at the end of the webinar when I'm kind of focusing on that. So let's get right into it. So the big secret in how to get your content read by thousands. So when I was trying to come up with different webinar ideas that I thought would be really useful for you guys, I started to think back to what questions I get asked a lot on all these different channels. So I quickly realized that what people really wanted to know was how I write blog posts that actually get read by not just a few people, but thousands of people. And you guys wanted to know what my big secret was. But here's the thing, I hadn't even realized it was a secret. I've been writing for the web for 7 years now, on and off, and I'm only 25. So if you do the math, that means I started writing when I was 18 and getting published online when I was 18. And then, I went off and I got 3 different degrees and I started a career as a teacher. So I was writing and freelancing all the way through that, and it wasn't until I moved to Vancouver. I'm originally from Dublin. And it wasn't until I moved to Vancouver that I actually managed to make a full-time career out of my writing. So before that, I was kind of fine-tuning this writing process. I was learning how to write quickly, efficiently, relevantly, out of necessity, out of time constraint, because I was juggling so much. And then, here I am today with this big secret writing process that I hadn't even realized was a secret. So I wrote a few blog posts because, everyone was asking me how I do it, but I just realized it wasn't enough. I was still getting asked questions. People weren't really picking up on it the way I wanted them to. And I realized writing is a really organic process. So I felt that it would be really, it would be better understood if we did it through a more organic medium, verbal. So I thought it'd be a great webinar for you guys. So here's the itinerary today, what I'll be talking about, broken up into 4 parts. The first is about learning social intelligence on the web. So that's just knowing your audience and your allies, and we'll talk a little about competition as well. The second is where we'll be spending most of our time, because it's the actual nitty-gritty. It's the writing process itself, and you guys are here to learn about that writing process. So I'll be spending most of my time on the writing process, and that's again broken up into 4 different stages: pre-writing, writing, reviewing, and publication. The third part is about social media and being seen and heard. And then the last part, I just quickly get into organization. Everyone kind of has their different ways of being organized. So I'm not going to dictate how to get organized, but I give you a general idea on how important, deadlines and schedules and stuff are, and how I do it, maybe to give you an idea of how you can do it too. Okay. So social intelligence on the web. So social intelligence is a person's competence to understand his or her environment optimally and react appropriately for socially successful conduct. But usually, in real life, we use body language, we have facial cues, We have posture to help us figure out what these social cues are and what this environment is. We don't have that on the web. So it's a whole new way to socialize. So we need to learn how to become socially intelligent in a new way, and we need to look for these new cues. So there are 3 different groups of people that you need to learn to find, know, and then understand in order to be successful at writing for the web. And that's your audience, your allies, and of course, your competition. We're going to be talking mostly about audience and allies and a little bit of competition, like I said. But knowing your audience is really, really important. And there are 3 stages to getting to know them. The first is through your business plan. And, you'll more than likely have this as you're kind of coming up with your product or your service idea already. This is very general knowledge. Who your product is for, why they will need the product or service, what, niche does your product or service fit in, et cetera, et cetera. And then you kind of get more detailed in the second stage through your research. So you scope out forums, you look at other blogs in your industry, you look at social media platforms, blog comments, reviews, forums. You really go through it with a fishing net, and you figure out who your audience is and what kind of style of writing they like. And in the end, you're going to be able to come up with a customer profile. This isn't just demographic information. I'm not just talking about age, gender, location. Of course, you need that. That's kind of the basic at this point. But it's the psychographic information that makes content really shine. It's the customer psychology. It's their interests. I've seen people, like businesses, align themselves with a specific political party, with specific political views. And that resonates amazingly with their customers because they know them so well. They know that their customers are conservative or liberal or what have you, and they align themselves really well with that. And they say, yeah, we're one of you. This is what we think. This is what we feel. And it's interesting because there is research on how well people react to that. So if you align yourself with a specific cause, people tend to trust that business more. And again, we're always trying to build trust. The second group of people you want to get to know really, really well is your ally. So the definition of an ally that I like is it's a person or an organization that cooperates or helps with another in a particular activity. Now, I've been asked before, is this not, an influencer or a supporter? But that's why I really like the word ally. I like the idea of the 2 groups coming together and just being an ally. So obviously, an influencer is someone who has the capacity to influence. They have that power to produce effects and actions and behaviors over others. And we all know people who have these influencer personality types, whether it's an older sibling, younger sibling, parent, teacher. They can make things happen just with an opinion. They're amazingly big personalities usually. But then you have the supporters who aren't necessarily always super influential. And I don't want to discredit them because they actually have a lot to say and they can be quite influential in more subtle ways. So this is just a person who improves and encourages someone or something. So the 2 of them work really, really well together, and I'll explain why. So when you get to know your allies, these are people who are supporting you, and you're building relationships. Building is huge right now. It's the new link building. Link building is, 3 years ago. I want to say like 10 years ago, but the internet moves so fast. It's not even that old yet. But, relationship building is the more modern way to think of the internet and talking to people on the internet. And it is actually building that relationship. And it's so important because you help each other out, You can promote across other channels when you have allies to promote with you. They will spread the word about your content, about your business through their channels. And they might even promote your content through channels that you're not on. So for example, I had a friend who runs his own blog recently tell me that he just saw this huge surge in his traffic. And I said, what's this from? And he was like, I don't know, I went to the back end and I was looking. Turns out somebody had taken one of his blogs and they had put it onto Flipboard. Don't know if you're familiar with Flipboard, but it's a kind of like, a content aggregator site. A lot of content curation goes on there, and it's actually a really, really amazing platform. Haven't quite gotten into using it yet, but it's definitely on my list of platforms to get into. And that was just an ally. That whether it was an influencer or just a supporter, whatever they did, wow, like he got this huge spike. So, and he's a very, very friendly, lovely person, and that he was definitely nurturing those relationships. Word of mouth advertising. We think that just because we're on the internet and we're not hearing the conversations happening over the backyard fence anymore, that word of mouth advertising doesn't exist. It does. And if people love you and if you give them a wow experience, they're going to talk about you, and you want people to do that. You definitely want people to do that. Your allies are also very vocal and they speak for a larger audience. So sometimes, especially if you nurture these relationships, you kind of get a bit of information that you might not necessarily have otherwise. So that's great. And you can ask them for favors, so that they're the people who are most likely to say yes and kind of get a project off on the right foot. And they're always kind of commenting on your blogs, and that is kind of a signal to Google and search engines and the bots to tell them that it's a popular blog as well. So how to spot your allies, which is quite difficult because they can just blend easily into your audience. But one of the very obvious ways is that they might keep coming back to your posts and commenting regularly. So they really, really like your content. That's probably the most obvious way, I would say. Then the next way would be that they try to connect with you in a really unconventional way. So they might direct message you. They might connect with you on a platform that you don't necessarily use for your business. They're literally trying to connect with you as a person rather than your relationship to the business. They will take your advice on board and come back to you with results, which is amazing, by the way. If you ever have an ally do that, you can update that blog post with actual results from actual people who have actually tried it. So that is absolutely great when they do that. Again, you're just working on this relationship building and really getting to know people and getting results from those people. And they'll reach out and they'll try to collaborate with you. So, if you know how to influence or market, that this is a big way for influencers to build relationships, is to kind of reach out and say, hi, I'm blah, blah, blah. We're doing this project. Could I get a quote from you? Could I get some ideas from you, et cetera, et cetera. And, when you reach out, they're really happy to work with you. So that's a great way to know that they're an ally. They're not somebody who's, competing with you. Speaking of competition, I don't want to get into too much because I feel like we're always talking about competition, and it's very, very simple. What your competition is doing wrong, so you can do it right. What your competition is doing right, so you can do it better. That's all I have to say about that. You just need to know what they're doing so that you can always one-up them. That sounds super competitive, but that's how it is. So the writing process itself. So we're going to talk about research, fearless brainstorming, finding your writing style, and acting as your own editor. So the writing process always comes into these 4 stages. So I have in my headline there, the simplified but consistent writing process. This is very, very simple, but it always stays the same. So that's why I think it's really useful to look at it this way, so that you know that you're always working through these stages. So there's pre-writing, writing, revision, and publication. And that's how I've broken the webinar down today, in this section of the webinar down today, to make that more clear for you guys. So the pre-writing is your researching and your brainstorming. So keywords, the very, very basics of keywords. I don't want to get too into this, but generally when you're looking for keywords, you're looking for words that a lot of people are searching, so that there's high search rates, but there's not a lot of really good content out there for that search result. So you can do keyword research right inside of Spokel if you're on Spokel. And again, I just wanted to show you this so you can see that there's the traffic there. See, everything that's green means that there is a lot of traffic and there's low competition, which means they're great content. They're great keywords. And again, if you're not on Spokal, that's fine. There is the Google AdWords, and you can do research there. Again, it's low competition, and a lot of searches is what you're looking for. They are your ideal. As well as that, you kind of want to stick with long tail keywords. So that's, as you can see here, these all have 3 words. If you just use one word, you know, there's so much content out there now. What is it? And since 2003, we've created more content than we have since the dawn of time. You know what I mean? Like, the internet is full of information. So if you're just going to look up marketing, I mean, people have been writing content about that for like 20 years now, you know, you're not going to rank super high for that. But if you get more specific, the chances are that you'll rank quite highly for it. And not only that, but people searching for more specific terms tend to be more ready to buy. So that's just a quick tip, is to two keywords or more, like a key phrase is kind of what you're looking for. And then when you have your keyword and your key phrase, your long tail key phrase chosen, you obviously go straight to Google and you do some online research. And what I do is I tend to look up my key phrase, and I take the first 10 results and I, right click it and open them in separate tabs. And I go through each of the 10. And, as most people do, we skim them. So I skim them and I see whether it's worth my while. If it is, I keep it open. If it isn't, I close it, and I do this with all of them. And I kind of take note as I'm going of what's really good, and I go through them again, and I'll copy and paste any information that I think is really, really useful. And then I'll do it again the second page of the Google search results. And the idea is that you're getting all the content that's already ranking for that keyword and that long tail key phrase that you have, and you're almost putting all that information together in one blog post. And you're obviously going to add your own flair to it as well, and your own data and your own information to make it even better. But the idea is that in the top 10 search results, you have that covered. You've definitely beaten them out. So fearlessly brainstorming. There's 3 steps to brainstorming like a pro. And by pro, I do mean I've been doing this. I've been writing for the web for 7 years, like I said, but I've been brainstorming for about 10. And my dad's a creative writer, and he taught me how to brainstorm really, really effectively. And I've always used this method, and it's never steered me wrong. So the first thing you need to do is give yourself a time limit and stick to it, which sounds really simple, but when's the last time you brainstormed? Did you give yourself a time limit? The chances are no, you didn't. You kind of just sat down and, scribbled away for a few minutes. When you give yourself a time limit, especially if it's an upper time limit, so the 30-minute would be the kind of most I would suggest before you start to lose your mind, you start to really think outside the box, because you're either going to sit there and stare at the page, or you're going to come up with ideas. And generally your brain doesn't handle boredom very well, and it comes up with ideas. So that's why time limits are amazing. On the other end, if you have so many ideas for one post and you set yourself a shorter time limit, you kind of learn how to get everything down there really, really quickly and figure out where your priorities lie. The second thing I would suggest is no distractions. So I do this old-fashioned. I paper and pen it, and I close the curtains, and I don't need my laptop, and I don't do mind maps on the laptop, and I don't use I know there are some amazing software out there for like mind mapping. I don't use any of that. I do paper and pen, no distractions, closed curtains. I usually have my phone because my timer is on it, but like pets, people, no, next 15, 20, 30 minutes, leave me alone. And then the final thing, and actually the most important thing, and probably the hardest thing, is just writing, just word vomit. There's no better way to say that except for word vomit. Write whatever comes to your mind and just keep writing. So here's an example of what that might look like. So, I'm firing out ideas really quickly and messily. This isn't well organized. This isn't something that I expect people to see. This is me scribbling. So you can kind of see maybe it starts all right in the middle, and I have a few ideas, and it just ends up getting really cramped. And this would be one of my neater ones even. Usually it's a mess. And as you can see, I actually while you're doing this brainstorm, you're firing off ideas, you're getting very, very creative, you're getting very energetic, and you start marking ideas that you really, really like. You'll do a circle or a star beside it, and you're like, yeah, like that, and you start making connections. So arrows come from other arrows, and all this happens within a space of a few minutes, and it's just a very, very productive and effective way to get your content ideas rolling. So once you've done that, we get into actual writing. Now, write your headline first. This is a new idea. Like, I've started doing this in the past 3 months, if even. And it's really, really effective. Every so often I forget to do it, which I know is horrible, just because I'm not in the habit of it. But writing your headline first is just amazing. You really start to get into exactly where you want to go, So it informs the rest of your content as you're writing. It solidifies exactly what you want to say. It also gets you to think about what makes your blog post special, what makes what you're about to write special, because you're thinking about what's going to catch people's attention, And then it also ensures that you stay on topic and that you answer the questions that you set out to. So writing your headline first, I found for the past 3 months has been super, super, super effective for me. And not only that, I've also started writing my headline 25 times, and I've done that for about 6 months now. I've been doing that for a while. And I'm down to about 20 now, honestly. I'm not doing 25 anymore because the last 5 were never giving me any good results. So I'm doing 20 because that's kind of within the range of finding really, really amazing headlines. And this is an idea from Upworthy. And, Upworthy have made a crazy successful business out of creating headlines that people just want to click and people want to read about. And just writing headlines a lot and just pushing the boundaries again really makes you think outside the box. And it's really important because headlines are really important, because if you don't write an amazing headline, it doesn't matter how amazing your content is. And that's just the facts. Only 2 out of 10 people will read past your headline. So that means 10 people are passing your headline and only 2 out of them are actually going to keep reading. If you want your readership to improve, you need to get more than 2 people to read your headline. This is on average. This statistic is on average. You don't want to be on average. You want to be above average. So that's why you need to really spend a lot of time in your headlines. So after you come up with your headline, it's obviously straight into your post. I like to do an introduction and conclusion. I see a lot of blog posts that don't do conclusions, and I don't. And I started not doing conclusions because I thought it was a little bit too formal. But it actually really frames the post. And especially if I'm really busy, I found myself kind of scrolling down to the bottom of the blog post and looking for the conclusion, because sometimes I don't have all the time to read, even like skim through the blog post. And when I see a conclusion there, I'm like, okay, what do they have to say? Oh, interesting. And I'll go back and I'll read the rest. So I really, really enjoy conclusions. So that's why I write them. I really think they frame the whole thing and give a sense of a start and a finish. And obviously your middle is the body, it's the meat. I like to use this burger. I used it while I was teaching English because it's like a creative writing thing. And, the buns, the start and finish, what holds it all together is the introduction and conclusion. And then the body is the meat and the veg. So 3 subheadings inside your body of your content. And what I do is I draft all the way through. So I'll, have my introduction, which I usually scribble out quite quickly. And then I'll usually have my 3 subheadings, which I get from my brainstorming. I'll have an idea of how I want to phrase things. And by 3 subheadings, I do mean that you can have way more than that. I've had like 8 subheadings in certain posts, depending on how long form it is, obviously. And you can even have 2 or 1, but do break it up. These are people who are kind of going to skim your content, and the easier it is for them to read, and the more you break it up, the better. So step 3 is writing your first draft all the way through. And this usually takes 3 to 4 hours when you're just getting started, and then you put it down to 2 hours with some practice and you start to not care as much. You start to realize how much you're going to have to edit, regardless of how long you take to write your first draft. So with some practice, you kind of end up learning that word vomit is okay, and you just, you let it all out. But the point of this is that you're doing it all the way through. So that means no breaks and no phone calls. Really, really get into the zone. No breathing. You can breathe. I'll let you breathe. But in general, get into the zone and really work all the way through it. And it gets hard. I think at the 45-minute mark, it gets really, really hard. And if you're feeling that, just go and get a cup of coffee, go and get a cup of tea, and push through it. You will get practice in pushing through that 45-minute mark and getting yourself into the zone on a consistent basis, which is amazing. Once you're in that zone, you will get a lot done. But it is kind of pushing through, knowing what tea to get or coffee or whatever works for you, knowing when to get it, knowing when to just stand up for a second and stretch out your arms and crack your back or whatever you need to do, and sitting back down and getting straight into it again. So when I say no breaks, I mean no 15-minute breaks. I literally mean just 2-3 minutes, walk up and down, go to the toilet, whatever you need. I'm not that strict about it. You can't breathe, I promise. And a quick note on writing style, just before I finish with this section of the writing process, because I get asked a lot of questions on, should I be casual? Should I be formal? Should I be rude? Or, can I use curse words? And it's just like, and I've written for a variety of different publications, and my answer is this kind of, you'll get an idea from your audience, knowing your audience, whether you can use curse words, whether you can use misspellings, whether you can be funny, whether you can be formal, whether you can be very academic. Very, very different writing styles for every single publication that I've written for. And, I write for different ones now, and what I write for Spokal would have a complete different tone than what I write for somewhere else. And and that just comes with knowing your audience and kind of getting into that frame of mind. And the second thing is that it comes with practice. So style really does come with practice. It comes with writing, seeing what works, seeing what people like, seeing what flows really nicely when you read it, reading your favorite blogs, seeing what works for you and what you enjoy reading. I would note that although I have seen some people who are super academic or super formal and it works amazingly for them, don't be afraid to be funny. Don't be afraid to crack a joke. Don't be afraid to make connections with people. That's fine. Funny makes connections. So don't be afraid to do it if it does come naturally to you and it's not something that you have to force. I'd also suggest being colloquial, which is just, being conversational. So write as if you're talking to an old friend. Don't make it less about like almost a teacher-student relationship. Make it more just a person talking to another person. I had this experience. Here it is. What's your experience? And then finally, never sacrifice style for good spelling and grammar and syntax. Yes, you can do it on purpose. And I've seen people, very, very funnily, like just do it on purpose, or they use lowercase instead of caps in their subject lines because it's less formal, etc. And that's fine. You're doing it on purpose. There's an intention behind it. But don't be lazy about it as well. Like intentional is fine, but do your spell checks, etc., etc. We all make mistakes and we all let a few things slip through, but generally just do your best not to sacrifice good spelling for content. But I have seen the argument on the other side, but my perspective would be when I'm reading content that I don't like to see bad spelling, it kind of puts me off. And now that we're talking about kind of revising and bad spelling, et cetera, let's get into stage 3 of the writing process, which is revision. Now, your first draft was obviously your word vomit that we were just talking about during the writing process. Then you have your second draft and your third draft and your fourth draft. Now I've just put 4 drafts here, 3 stages of revision after your first draft. But really, like, there's been times that I've had to revise things like 6-7 times. There are times that it's just not coming together, and they never follow this exact process either. But just to give you guys an idea, I always make sure to at least revise it 3 times. That is actually my minimum. And the reason I revise so often is because I don't ever stop revising until I can read through my entire document, my entire piece of content in read mode, in Word, without stopping to correct any errors. So if you go into Word and you go under the review tab, you'll see a read mode, and you that kind of just like blanks your screen out and you can just read, and you have to exit that to edit, which I think is really useful, because when I exit, I'm like, oh, it means I have to start again, darn. So if I have to exit, it means I have to go and start all over again and read through, and then if I exit again, I have to do it again. So very, very important to just read through your entire content without stopping, and that's a really good signal that your content is working well. And finally, congratulations, you're done. You are ready to publish. I don't need to go too much into this because it's just copy and paste your work into your preferred blogging platform. Now, I didn't mention this, but I do all my writing in a Word document, and then I publish it onto my preferred publishing platform, which is, in this case, is Spogle. And I copy and paste it from there. And then I kind of add photos to my blog, or I create them. So I'm really into doing DIY images right now. DIY images are huge. Like, people are so sick of looking at stock images. So if you can create something DIY just to catch people's attention, we're very, very visual learners. So getting a little DIY image up there is really nice, and it gets shared a lot. People find it really interesting. So I would suggest that. And obviously alt tags and attribute it correctly. So alt tags is just basically your way of telling Google what the image is and what it's connected to, because Google can't see images. So you need to kind of add that alt tag so that they know how to index it correctly, I guess. And then preview your post, make sure that the formatting looks good. The amount of times that I've previewed the post and the formatting is just all crazy and I don't know what's happened. So please make sure you do that. And then time zone differences, obviously make sure you're publishing at the optimal time for your audience and where they are. So Tweetroid, and there are a lot of different apps out there where you can find out exactly when your audience is on social media, and getting a good idea. Usually it's everyone that I know, like, it's somewhere between 8 and 10 in the morning that they're on, and then they're on again around between 12 and 1, and then they're on again about 5. And that's, their current local time. That's generally the gist I've gotten from people. But it does vary depending on the person. So I would kind of do a little bit of research before you know exactly when your audience is on, so you know when you should be publishing content. Speaking of social, we are on social, and more social. So I mentioned it 3 times because it's really, really important. So I'm going to be talking about content distribution and commenting. So sharing your content on social media, it always follows this pattern. So it's a publish, share, engage, measure, and then maybe repurpose. So obviously you publish your content like we had just mentioned, and then you share it. And if you're wanting to automate this process, it's amazing. It saves time. You don't have to kind of be up at 9 a.m. ready to publish or and share it on your different social media websites at the right time. You can automate this. If you're on Spogle, you already know that we have a editorial calendar. You can drag and drop, and it will automatically share to your Twitter and Facebook anyways. And if you're not on Spogle, there's loads of apps. Hootsuite, Buffer do all of this as well. So you have plenty of choice, and Buffer and Hootsuite have like free smaller packages as well, so you don't even have to pay for it if you're a small business. And then engage, which is the really important part. So when people are sharing or people are commenting on it, connect with them, make those conversations happen. If they're commenting on your blog post, answer the comments. And then measure, see how it actually is performing. And then if it's performing really, really well, I would suggest repurposing it as well. So make it into a slide share, make it into an ebook, may, you know, extend it further and make it into a PDF, make a template for it, whatever it is, that can be really, really effective for people too. So 2 questions I get about content distribution a lot. Should I keep publishing the same content over and over? Yes, yes, should. Simple answer there. You don't be afraid to be plugging yourself or whatever. As long as you're curating content and you're sharing other content, not just the same thing again and again, as long as you're changing and personalizing the kind of status or the post or the tweet, and you're not just putting the headline on all the time. These are what we call broadcasters. They're literally just like shouting out to the world. As long as you're personalizing and, you know, engaging with it, yeah, you can publish the same content over and over. And how can I publish over and over without being on the internet all day? Again, like I said before, that is just social media management tools like Buffer and Hootsuite. And if you're on Spokal, that will handle it for you too. So making a social sharing schedule, a whole bunch of options for you there. Spokal is obviously all around like just a marketing automation software, but I just wanted to include it there because we do have social sharing schedule. And that's the calendar that you get with Spokal, which I just think is amazing. And I haven't seen something similar to it yet. And I really want it for my own personal blog, to be honest. I just want this to be an app, so I just think it's amazing. And then there's Hootsuite, Buffer, IFTT, Social Oomph, TweetDeck. You know, there's so many different social media sharing management tools. So definitely choose which one suits you best and get a good social sharing schedule based off of the optimal timing of your audience. And get your name out there by leaving a comment on everything. So that's blogs, shares, posts, YouTube, articles, links, webinars, quizzes, surveys, anything you can. It's great to get your, this is coming back to the relationship building thing. You know, social media is where these conversations are happening. Social media is where these conversations happen very organically too. So, you know, get your name out there. Blogs is kind of the best place, I think, that you can leave a comment, or, you know, Google Plus is amazing for engagement. You know, once you engage in people in Google Plus, they're very, very quick to have an amazing conversation with you. So I really like that. But blog posts, definitely, I would comment, and it not only just builds relationships, it engages with their content, and hopefully they'll engage with your content as well. And, you know, it can draw their attention to what you're doing. There's been a few times where, you know, I've not really plugged Spokal. I don't want to say it like that, but I've, you know, said like, oh, you know, you guys are talking about this, and I wrote a post similar, like if you need help, or, oh, I had that problem with that source. I couldn't find that source and I found it, blah, blah, blah. So, you know, you can make these connections and help each other out and kind of build a community with leaving commenting on everything, you know. And then finally, organization. Again, I don't want to dictate how people organize themselves, but there are 2 things that really help with productively producing content, and that's schedules and deadlines. So creating a blogging calendar and a schedule really, really helps. And I just made this super easy with the table function. But we have a small business pack as well in like www.getspokal.com/blog. And on the sidebar, you'll see a small business pack, and you can go ahead and just download something that's much fancier than this, because I don't give myself the fancy stuff. I give you guys the fancy stuff. And you can download that and you can have your own blogging template. And I print these off and I have the dates on it for every month, and I put them on my wall. And it just means that every time I go to write, there's always ideas there. I don't necessarily always stick to it, because sometimes there's a more like newsy piece that I might want to cover it that I think people are interested in. But, you know, if that happens, I just, you know, circle that and push it down to another date. So, you know, I'm always like ready with the next content idea, which I think is really, really helpful. And then creating strict or tight deadlines for yourself. It's really important to put yourself under pressure. And, you know, with content marketing, I think there's all these like really, really little things that you do that take up a lot of time. Like, for example, if you're starting to create DIY graphics, they can take so long. Or if you want to make, you know, an infographic, they can take so long as well. So, and, you know, even webinars take so long. I was trying to get an idea of how long it took to produce a webinar the other day, and I couldn't really get answers, but I was getting anywhere from 10 hours to 40 hours, like, and I was just like, whoa, like these things take so long, you know? So on a good day, figure out how long it takes you to create these things, and then put yourself under pressure to get it done, because they can actually take a lot longer, especially if you're on a bad day and, you know, in a graphic, maybe the colors aren't working at the best, or in the webinar, it's just the flow isn't right. How long does it take you in a good day? And try to give yourself that deadline, and, you know, stick to it to the best of your abilities. And then, you know, create a little bit of a schedule like I have there. So on Mondays, we always publish on Tuesday and Thursdays. So Mondays and Wednesdays I write, and I do everything for the blog post on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Tuesdays and Thursday mornings, I do a bit of outreach. So I like to share that content around and get people engaged in the conversation about it. And then I have the rest of the time to do whatever extra activities we have for Spokal. So that might be creating guest posts for other websites. It might be creating webinars. It might be creating a new newsletter, whatever it is. But that time is really set aside for just creating bigger and better content. So that's really important too. So if there are 4 key takeaways that I wanted you to take from this webinar, it's firstly, get to know the people who will likely be reading and sharing your content, and get to know them really, really well. Secondly, write fearlessly, because you'll be revising it over and over again anyways. Remember, only what you're ready to put out there will go out there. So don't be afraid to word vomit. Again, that's just practice and becoming more fearless with it. And thirdly, don't just sell your own content, sell advice and help. Show people that it's not about you by curating and commenting on other content. So making sure that you're really building relationships by engaging with people. And finally, get organized. You'll be a lot more productive and a lot less stressed if you have deadlines and schedules and planners and everything looks good. So I'm going to open the floor to a Q&A now. So there's just a bit of a time delay. I did see I had a question there from earlier, so I'm just going to answer that while the Q&A is getting set up. Someone asked what SEO features do I think are most important, because yeah, I guess I didn't mention SEO at all there. And that's actually because, right, I hate plugging Spokal so much, but if you've been in Spokal, you'll see on the editor that there is live SEO updates as you write. So it kind of tells you what you should be doing SEO wise as you know, after you copy and paste your content in there. So, you know, say I copy and pasted 1,000 words, it would tell me that you know, my keyword density isn't high enough or low enough. And I'd go through my content and I would delete or add the keywords where it's most natural. I don't ever force it, because that's not what SEO is about anymore. And then, so I would always find the keywords to be really important. I like to make sure that I have the right density of keyword, which I think is between 2 and 4.5% or something like that. Oh no, 1 and 4.5%. I think anything over it looks like keyword stuffing. Anything under it, just, you know, the Google bots won't pick up that that's what your content is about, or that's what it's directed towards. The other thing is the alt tags, and that's kind of for me, an inclusive thing as well, because alt tags help Google figure out what your image is about, but it also helps people who might not necessarily be able to see images figure out what your image is about. So if they have a reader or something on the computer, the reader can read the alt tag and tell the person who is, you know, looking at your content what the image is. So I think that's kind of helpful. I think it's quite important. And then probably header tags. I think header tags are quite important too, because, well, it's just, it kind of organizes everything a little bit better. It makes your content flow nicely. And it's just a really effective way to get SEO looking good. Okay, so any other questions you can put in the chat. The Q&A isn't opening for me. It was working this morning, but now it doesn't work because, of course, it doesn't work. Sorry, there's a bit of a time delay, so I'm just going to wait and see if anyone has any questions. Okay, no more questions except for the SEO one. And like I said, I wouldn't focus too much on SEO either. And I mentioned keywords a little bit in the research section. I think keywords would probably be the most important thing, as long as you kind of tell the bots and tell your audience what your content is about so that people can find you. I think that's probably the most important SEO detail. And besides that, create your content for people, and ideally you're doing it for the bots as well, but don't ever like keyword stuff, or don't kind of insert keywords where it's not natural to. I think that's probably like a big content killer. So thank you so much for joining us today. If you want any more great content from moi, mosey on over to our website at www.getsvocal.com/blog. If you have any questions that maybe you didn't get a chance to ask in the webinar, feel free to send me an email just at sarah@getsvocal.com, and I will definitely get back to you ASAP. And I'm not just saying that, I actually will. I'm pretty good at that. So thank you so much for watching again. Have a great day, and I will hopefully see you for another one of our webinars later on. Have a great day. Bye.